Okay, this is going to be a video just showing the processing steps of how I would set one of these magnetic guide cases up. So just to quickly show you the case, now you don't have to do this, but I do find this to be useful, especially for me as I send these cases out. You know, I want to be able to mount everything up where I can, you know, look at it, make sure all the occlusion turned out correctly. So these are just some little bases. So one of the things I found is, you know, I already had my articulator digitized where I could print an extension up to this, but the models were just so tall that this shortened it by a good hour just making this little insert. So if you just simply took one of your plates, scanned it, then you can make this little insert that goes in, and I created, you know, kind of like you would do with using a drill in your stone model if you wanted to be able to break them apart and reorient them. Same idea. And then these are little wells for 3mm thick by 5mm diameter magnets. I just put 3 of those. Use any kind of magnet you want. And in the opposing model, so I have these surfaces. And now when I just print this model, it's relatively short. I don't have to, you know, wait 4 hours for these models to print. This is relatively short. It prints with these wells, and these are permanently mounted. So all I have to do is find the polarity so that I know which direction they go in here, and then just drop them in. And I do that with upper and lower, and that way right out of the printer I can have models that orient themselves like so, and you can see the occlusion is correct. I need to make a video on how I did that, but if you know a little bit of mesh mixer and scanning, you could do this, right? I mean, if you had your pen in set at 0, then you could stick this articulator in a desktop scanner, and you could know the distance from here to here, and then however big of an extension you want. I have this thing in like a 10mm extension, 20. You know, if I'm doing little aligner models that are only that tall, I don't want to have to extend it that far up. So print these inserts one time, and then any kind of models you have, you can just orient them like so. All right, so that's neither here nor there. Let's go through and look at this case. So again, I've done these in the past where I would print the original jaw, and then I would print the jaw after the teeth removed, and then I would print the jaw as reduced. And so these are big models. They take a lot of resin. It seems wasteful. So what I'll do is I'll create this. So this would be for testing out the fit of the pin guide. So the idea with this is you would seat your pin guide, and the way I've got this case set up, you would just drill pins 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then just take the guide off and throw it away. That's a single-use guide, and that's its only purpose. Now, that's a user preference thing. Some people want to put it in one time and at the very beginning and never touch it again, but I find this doesn't matter at all. And other people I find actually want the ability to do the extractions without a guide in the way, okay? So to cut down on models, what I do is I've got that, and then if I want to simulate the reduced jaw, I just do that, okay? So that is done by just taking your reduced jaw model, go into the denture module or exocad, and just generate a path of draw, and then subtract that path of draw model from your original intraoral scan. You end up with something like this. Okay, so it's just cutting down on the amount of model work. All right, so the idea would be we'll do that, and then we would extract all the teeth and then slide in the reduction guide. So this is one of my guides with the built-in pin. I just did one on this one, and I actually created some occlusal extensions, but it self-orients, right? So once you extract the jaws, you would still have some bone above this. This guide would just come in, slide in like so, and then since you've already got pinholes drilled, you could seat all of your pins, all right? And that, again, would be self-orienting. So I've got actually 4 pinholes, but the step now that we need to do is to build in the magnets, all right? So one of the things that's gonna really make this much easier, I'm gonna just take this model off and put that all to the side. So we need to orient our magnets. What I do is I've got these 3mm cylinder magnets. And again, you can use any type of magnets that you want. It's really just up to you. But the 3x3s are pretty good bang for the buck for their size versus their grab. I've also done them with, you know, various bar magnets. So these would be my ones for mounting those models. These guys, if you have the room for them, are really, really strong. They grab great. Again, you can buy these things. They're so dirt cheap that whatever size you like, knock yourself out. But these are small enough that they're easy to build in. So it doesn't matter which direction you set your polarity up, but just make sure that they're all consistent. So what I like to do is I'll put a Sharpie mark on the top of this, okay? And I'll put in all of the magnets on the reduction guide with that facing up, okay? So I'll do that and then kind of slide it off. Now we'll have cement in these, okay? And then I would do that and slide it off, okay? Now right now it's not grabbing, I don't have any cement in there, and I don't want to risk getting cement into my models or gluing anything together. So we'll take all this out. So we're going to do that and use some kind of a cement. You could use any cement's going to hold these things in place. But the point of doing this, and I lost my orientation. So I had actually already, since I made these before my reduction guides came in, I've already got magnets oriented here. So they need to be opposite this, okay? So that's how the magnets want to orient, which means that when I'm putting them into this, I need to have this side oriented up, okay? So that, as I work through here and start putting in the magnets, it'll be this direction. Then, however many other stuff you have, again, I've already done that, but I haven't done the drill guide. Remember, you've got to be opposite polarities, and you don't want to sit here for hours doing this thing one magnet at a time. So once I've done this with the Sharpie spot up, then I would just reverse it. So if I want to put them in here, it would be Sharpie side down, and then I would just proceed. So one of the things you should do is, if your lab is not already doing your trimming and post-processing, these metal prints can kind of be a little messy. And so you want to make sure actually that there's no support structures in there and that all of these are seating passively before you start gluing. Because what you don't want to do is get right in the middle of it, press it in, you got cement everywhere, and now one of them's not going down. Okay, so I've already verified that. So what I'm going to do, both of my temps I've already done ahead of time, and since I know the orientation, the only magnets I need to do are here. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and start doing the glue up. So I'm going to push all the stuff I don't need to the side, and we'll go ahead and start. All right, I've already bled my cement cartridge, and you want to fill this, I would say, about halfway. If you get a little excess, that's not a problem. And it's not a bad idea to have, put your cement in the refrigerator to slow down the set time. You're not in a hurry on this, so you want to be able to do multiple guides at the same time so that you're not using a bunch of cement. It always bothers me with how expensive cements are to lose all that waste in the tips. Now we start setting them up, and I'm going to show you one other trick that you can do, which is to put some individual magnets, out here to the side, because if you want to keep these things fully engaged and pulled down internally, then you can actually stick a magnet on the other side. All right, so we said reduction guide is going to be black dot facing up, so I'm going to push that in, slide that off. Okay, I always try to cover that. And then again, my example here, if I wanted to make sure that that stays in place and is fully seated, I could just stick some magnets underneath, and that's going to keep that thing pulled in completely. So we're going to just proceed around the arch this way, I don't worry about excess cement at this stage. I will wait till everything is in place, and then we can wipe it up at the end. And my hands themselves are getting some of that excess off. Okay, so if we did it that way, now we're going the black dot facing down. And again, even if some of this cement hardens and it's in the way, you'll be able to easily adjust that out because, you know, the guide's metal, cement's resin, it's going to come right off. So we're essentially done. Okay, take a non-metal instrument, and again, you could either put a magnet on the opposing side, which keeps it pulled down, or just take a wood handle, plastic, make sure those are all completely seated and as deep into the guide as possible. And there we have it. Okay, I'm gonna grab a paper towel to wipe off the excess. And we'll start going around and removing any excess. Get to a clean portion of your paper towel as you wipe different areas. That's good. And now we let it set. Now, if you've done a dual cure cement, you could go ahead and hit this with a light just to get the gel phase started where you don't have to worry about something popping out. I'm just doing a real brief cure to give it a head start. All right, that should be pretty well set. So if you can look closely here, one of the things you'll notice is that my wells for these 3x3 magnets are actually, 0.3 of a millimeter deeper because I actually want a little bit of excess space over the top. One for wiggle room to make sure I'm not going to get my magnet sticking up tall where it might inhibit the seating. But two, I'll get the question sometimes, are these magnets, FDA approved? They're a magnet. They're not going to hurt the patient, so it's really not a concern. But if you've made that a little bit recessed, then by virtue of just wiping off the excess, you're going to get a little cement left over the top, which is going to fully encase this. So now it is fully encased. It's not in direct contact with the patient in any way, and so you don't have to worry about that. All right, so I'm going to pause for a moment until this is completely set, and then we'll test it. Okay, so our cement has set up, and now you can see everything is in place. And if I want to attach these two, I just put the magnets together, everything pulls together perfectly. A couple things to note: if you've done this right and you've gotten all the excess cement off, you should see this is absolutely flush all the way around. If anywhere you see that it's not, that's where you need to go back, see if you've got missed cement, see if there's a burr or some kind of a support that was left, because again, the accuracy of your drill guide is all contingent on the fact that everything is seating properly, and that's your check visually to know that that's happening. All right, so we already showed the reduction guide. So after we pull the teeth, this thing now would just slide into place like so. Let's drop our pins in. Now I went pretty heavy on the pins here because whenever I have a case where extractions are being done, I would rather err towards, so see, that's something I need to run a drill through, because probably as these models were being washed, I may have left a little resin in there. So I want to make sure everything is fully seating, but for right now, well, there it goes. Okay. So you would now reduce the jaw down to this. You can see I've done some occlusal extensions because, this one kind of had a weird tapering up. And, I worried that if I just ended it purely buckle, it wouldn't really be clear where to end that tapering. You don't have to do that, it's totally up to you. So we would get this in place, we would reduce the jaw to this level, and then drill guide goes into place and check all of your drill sites. Okay, so that's actually too big of a drill for this case, so I'm just going to run my drill through everywhere. This is for the Biomax fully guided keyless kit, and I should see that in every site this is going in. You want just a tiny bit of deviation like you see there, otherwise you're going to generate binding. And chew your drills up. That looks good. That looks good. And then the other thing I'm checking, because like in this case, you see how it's rougher on this side than it is this side. That means they oriented it this way to the print bed, just due to the geometry probably of these little pegs. And I do see a couple of little burrs, like right there is one. I want to make sure all of those burrs have been removed, and that when I fully seat this, I'm seeing that stop goes all the way to the top of the guide tube. If I see any daylight between there, that tells me that I've got a burr or some kind of roughness that's not letting it get fully seated. Okay, so we would do our drill guide, everything's lined up there, and then once we've done that, take the drill guide off, put it aside. Your implants would now be in place, and now you can put on your multi-unit abutments, your titanium cylinders, and then you would get your temporary restoration. So this one, most of them are pretty parallel, but you notice these holes aren't perfectly concentric. They're a little bit oblong. That is because there's a path of draw over this. Usually if you've got a little bit of divergence between the implants, you either have to make these holes huge, or do them like a couple of cylinders at a time, but by building in a path of draw over all of them simultaneously, this should seat over the top of this and drop into place like so. Okay, and I do notice here that I've got a little burr somewhere, because I see about 1/4 millimeter of space right up here. So again, I'm certain that's because I've not fully trimmed my support. So I'll go back and I'll check this. Again, we're trying to get the maximum accuracy here that's possible. And I actually have not checked this yet as far as the bite's concerned. So let's put it back on the articulator. And let's check out the occlusion. And that's pretty darn good. I would take that. You always expect to have to do just a minor amount of occlusal adjustment on these, but that is super close. And probably once I get whatever that little burr is dealt with, it will be dead on. Okay? And then just a couple other things to notice. Look at your distance between the restoration intaglio and the top of the newly reduced jaw. I think on this case, usually I'll do it at a uniform 3, but if I look in that case and it appears that there's pretty thin tissue, I might drop that to 2.5. I think this one was 2.5 millimeters, but we've got that uniform distance all the way across the arch. And one of the ways you'll know this is after they've been healing for a while. If you were to remove this, if you've got it too close to the bone, it's going to look red and angry and inflamed. If you've gotten it too far, which shouldn't happen if you do 3 millimeters, but if you've gotten too far away from the bone, what you're going to see is that you're not going to have a depression in the tissue. So it's not going to look like this is emerging out of the tissue. It's going to look like just flat surface to flat surface, or even you might still have an ovate contour to the tissue because you just had too much distance that it couldn't close. All right, so on these, what we'll do typically is get all the implants in, pick this thing up, and then once it's been picked up, you'll come back and you'll section there, there, and there, which leaves you a fully, fully contoured hybrid restoration that's now supported by the titanium cylinders. And then we would actually screw that back in, and then suturing happens at the very end. I'll owe all this to Danny and all his amazing surgical skills, but what he found was that if you suture the tissue to this, we published a paper called the Full Arch Healing Abutment. And the concept is that tissue is going to assume the shape of whatever you put there for it to assume to. Okay, so implants are in place. We do 1 to 2 PRF slugs over each site, and then sandwich that in. So when you screw this in, that's pinning the PRF in place. That's going to be what takes up this space between tissue and bone. I'm sorry, between restoration and bone. Then you would have your surgical flap edges. And usually what Danny will do is take a big bite, and he's going to do one horizontal mattress suture. So he might go through the buccal here, out the lingual, and then take a big bite, come maybe up to canine, back through the lingual, out through the buccal, and then tie it off on the buccal. And that's going to snug that tissue up to the restoration, because this thing has been designed where it's fully ovate. There's no concave surfaces to it. And so as that tissue heals, that PRF is taking up that space. It's going to vascularize, turn into tissue. And if you've done this right and got all the distances correct, then at the end, when you remove that temp and the tissue's all healed, the tissue ought to actually be concave where it's in contact with this, because this is convex. So that's going to be a much more cleansable situation with no ridge lapse, and you're going to have a much healthier outcome for the long term. So anyway, that's the processing of these cases. I'll try to maybe do another video where I show how I do the pinking. But as you can see, this is just TOB elixirs and nano varnish from Dreve over the top. All right, that's it.